The tiger was already on the edge of death, its white coat smeared with blood, its ribcage crushed under the relentless grip of a python as thick as a tree trunk. It was a sight no one was meant to see, and yet, from the trees, a figure emerged, not a man, not a beast, something older than legend, walking straight into the nightmare without fear. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The fog in Cedar Ridge that morning was thick enough to swallow sound, turning the old-growth forest into a silent cathedral of pale light and shadows, nestled just beyond the sleepy town of Silver Glen, Oregon. The forest rose like a green wall, ancient and breathing. Damp air hung with the scent of moss, cedar, and the cold iron smell of dew on stone. The clouds hugged the canopy, blurring the line between ground and sky, leaving only the rhythm of breath and boots on forest soil to break the silence. Emily Carson, 25, stood at the edge of a narrow game trail, notebook in one hand, GPS tracker in the other. Her build was compact and strong, with sun-kissed skin and hair the color of copper bark tied in a loose braid. She wore cargo pants muddied at the knees, a flannel shirt under a weatherproof vest, and scuffed hiking boots that had long stopped caring about comfort. Emily had always been drawn to the wilderness, not for its serenity, but for its mystery. Her sharp hazel eyes didn't just observe nature, they searched it. She hadn't come here for rest. Cedar Ridge was where legends lingered, and she was here to chase one. Bigfoot, though often dismissed by academics, Emily believed, not just out of fascination, but out of memory. Her older brother Liam, gone now 5 years, had vanished during a backpacking trip in another range chasing similar signs. He had filled his journals with sightings, strange tracks, and whispers Emily never forgot. Trailing a few steps behind her was Professor Ben Holloway, a tall man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a lean frame more used to labs than field work. His khaki jacket bore the stains of decades spent among books and tree roots, and his manner was calm. If a bit absent-minded, he believed in patterns, in probability, in giving myths just enough room to be investigated, not believed blindly, but not dismissed outright either. And he believed in Emily. He had seen how her grief became determination, and he never tried to talk her out of it. They had been out for hours, marking tree scratches, scat samples, and possible footprints. Everything felt ordinary until it wasn't. At first, it was faint, a low sound beneath the wind, a strange, wet growl. Emily froze mid-step. She tilted her head. There it was again, a guttural, broken roar, deep and pained, coming from beyond the mist. Not a bear, not a cougar, something else. "Did you hear that?" she asked, already stepping off trail. Ben hesitated, probably just, but she was already moving. The underbrush pulled at her boots as she pushed through a thicket of alder and fern. The sound came again, louder this time. Desperation threaded through it. Her breath quickened. She kept low, brushing aside branches slick with fog. Then she saw it, in a shallow dip just off the trail. Beneath the twisted limbs of a storm-bent tree, a white tiger lay thrashing in the mud. Its massive body, coated in mud and blood, was writhing violently, its back legs kicking out in fading bursts of power. Around its torso and neck, a Burmese python, enormous and coiled with lethal precision, was tightening with every breath the tiger tried to take. Emily's heart stopped. She ducked lower, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The tiger was stunning even in agony, its fur pale like snow, with faded gray stripes barely visible beneath blood-slicked flanks. Its eyes, wide with panic, gleamed icy blue in the low light. Foam gathered at the edge of its mouth. Its chest heaved. The snake was thick as a tree trunk, muscles rippling beneath patterned scales, each movement precise and brutal. It had anchored its tail around a nearby stump, using leverage to increase the pressure with terrifying force. Emily knew enough to understand. This was a death sentence in progress. The tiger let out another roar, weaker now, more breath than voice. Its front paw swiped at nothing, sinking into wet soil. Its eyes blinked slowly, once, twice, and then stilled, as if time were folding in. Emily couldn't move. The fog swirled around her shoulders, somewhere behind her. She heard Ben's voice calling faintly, but she couldn't turn back. All she could do was watch. Emily didn't move. The air had grown colder around her, though it was not the wind, but the weight of what she saw that froze her in place. The white tiger, tangled in the grotesque embrace of a massive Burmese python. Struggled less now, its strength fading with each shallow breath. Blood darkened the white fur around its chest. Emily's mind screamed to act, to help, but her limbs remained locked in fear and awe. Then the forest shifted. It was not the rustle of deer or the cautious step of a cougar. It was heavier, slower, and full of intent. From the fog-drenched trees to her left, a figure emerged, towering and broad, its form almost blending with the trunks behind it, covered from head to foot in thick, dark brown hair. The creature moved with surprising grace for something so large, muscles coiled beneath its fur, and its massive hands curled with calm purpose. It stood at least 7.5 feet tall, its shoulders wide as an ox, and its eyes, deep, amber, and quiet, held no panic, only resolve. Bigfoot, not a shadow in a blurry photo, not a rumor whispered around campfires. Real, solid, alive. Emily stared, barely able to blink. The creature looked at the tiger, then at the python, then let out a low, guttural sound, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. It was not a roar of rage, it was a warning, a declaration, and then, without hesitation, Bigfoot stepped into the clearing and approached the struggle. The python sensed the threat and shifted its coils, attempting to secure its hold. Its tongue flicked rapidly, body twitching. The tiger groaned, its paw twitching weakly. Bigfoot moved with precision. It gripped one of the thick coils around the tiger's ribcage and pulled. The snake hissed and whipped its head toward the new enemy, striking with sudden speed. But Bigfoot twisted, avoiding the bite, and slammed a massive hand down onto the base of the snake's neck, firm but measured. Not to kill, just to distract. Emily watched, heart pounding. As the primal battle unfolded, the python coiled tighter in response, its thick body rippling as it tried to regain dominance. But Bigfoot was relentless. It moved with patience, undoing the snake's grip not by tearing but by understanding, one loop at a time, methodically loosening each band of muscle. The tiger whimpered, its breathing began to hitch, but the pressure on its chest was lessening. Then the last coil came free. The python, sensing the fight was turning, began to uncoil, slithering back with defensive speed. It retreated into the brush, disappearing into the undergrowth as quickly and silently as it had appeared. Bigfoot stood over the tiger, its broad chest rising and falling. It looked down at the animal, placing a hand gently near its shoulder. Just a touch, firm and watchful. The tiger blinked slowly but did not flinch. Its breath, though faint, continued. Emily finally let out the breath she had been holding. She took a step forward, but Bigfoot turned his gaze toward her. Their eyes met for For one long moment, nothing moved. No words, no sound, only fog curling between them. Then Bigfoot stepped back, gave the tiger one last look, and silently disappeared into the trees, elsewhere in the forest. Professor Ben Holloway adjusted the small GPS tracker clipped to his jacket. The signal readings were erratic, unfamiliar. He was several hundred feet west of where he had last seen Emily, checking camera traps and motion sensors. But now, something wasn't right. Multiple tags on the satellite overlay blinked irregularly. Too many, too close, too fast. He knelt by a patch of moss and brushed back the pine needles. Tire tracks. Not fresh, but not old either. And far off any trail used by rangers or researchers. Ben frowned. He pulled out his tablet and began syncing the coordinates. The heat signatures weren't from wildlife. The clusters were too orderly, too human. Then he remembered the rumors, illegal animal traffickers, known to exploit remote conservation zones like Cedar Ridge. He had dismissed them at first, but now, the signs were clear. Armed groups, possibly tranquilizer gear, working in tandem. Ben stood and scanned the forest around him. The mist made everything shift and blur. But now he saw the forest with new eyes, not just wild and untouched, but threatened. Something terrible was unfolding under the canopy. And Emily was still out there. The mist clung to the clearing like a veil that refused to lift. Silence, heavy and sacred, blanketed the forest floor where death had nearly taken hold. The white tiger lay still, his breath shallow and tremulous, eyes half-lidded but open, around him. The earth bore the marks of violence, flattened ferns, claw marks in the mud, deep impressions where the python's coils had crushed the soil. But now, all of it seemed to dissolve into stillness. Bigfoot remained beside the tiger, crouched low in a way that defied the hulking power of his form. His movements were slow, careful, as though the clearing itself might break if he moved too quickly. With surprising gentleness, he reached forward and pressed a large, weathered hand, fingertips dark with ancient dirt, against the tiger's ribcage. The tiger stirred, but did not recoil. Then, in a gesture so strange, it bordered on the mythic. Bigfoot leaned in and licked the wound along the tiger's neck, not roughly, not as a beast would clean its kill, but with a quiet purpose, an instinctive balm, a gesture of care from one wild soul to another. Emily watched from the edge of the brush, no longer afraid. Her heart beat slow, reverent. She had seen enough to know this moment didn't belong in a textbook. It couldn't be measured by tracking data or analyzed with a peer-reviewed thesis. What she was witnessing was communion, wordless, primal, pure. The tiger closed its eyes. It exhaled a shallow, trembling breath, and for the first time, its body did not fight. It rested. Emily stepped from her hiding place, slowly, hands in front of her, palms facing out. She said nothing, made no sudden movement. Her boots sank softly into the moss, and the fog curled around her like a cloak. Bigfoot turned his head, watching her approach. There was no sound, no growl, no retreat, just eyes the color of autumn leaves, watchful, curious, knowing. She stopped a few feet away, enough to respect the fragile thread of trust that pulsed between them. Her voice caught in her throat, so instead she nodded once, slowly. A silent "thank you." Bigfoot studied her face, as if memorizing it. Then he looked back to the tiger. A final moment passed between the three of them, woman, beast, legend, and then, with the same quiet he had arrived with. He stood and moved toward the trees. His footsteps were silent, his shape swallowed by cedar and shadow. Emily dropped to her knees beside the tiger, now unconscious but alive. She touched his fur. It was coarse with dried blood and mud, but beneath that, the warmth of life still remained. She whispered gently, "You're safe now. You made it." Her hand rested just above his paw. "I'll call you Ghost." A mile deeper into the forest, Professor Ben Holloway hunched over a fallen log, camera in hand. His breath fogged the lens as he zoomed in on a campsite that hadn't been there yesterday. Tents, military grade, camouflaged and low profile, equipment cases, a generator faintly humming, and movement. He adjusted his angle. One of the men walked into view, tall and lean with close-cropped hair and a jagged scar down the left side of his cheek. Reed Monroe. Ben had seen his photo before in a wildlife trafficking database. Former recon soldier turned black market tracker. Precise, cruel, and completely unburdened by morality. Reed was infamous for transporting rare wildlife across borders with chilling efficiency. Ben kept low, watching as Reed unzipped a side pouch and pulled out a holoscreen tablet, flicking through files until he stopped at a photograph. The image was unmistakable, a white tiger, injured, marked with location data. They were after the tiger, Ghost. Ben's stomach turned. He scanned the rest of the camp. 4 men total, all armed. One of them was checking a case filled with tranquilizer darts. Another marking map coordinates on a digital tablet. The gear was top-end. Military surplus. These weren't amateurs. This wasn't just hunting. It was procurement, logistics. And Ghost wasn't just a target. He was a contracted specimen. Ben backed away slowly, cursing the crunch of pine needles under his boots. He needed to get back to Emily. She had to be warned. But before he could move far, a voice snapped through the trees. "You lost." Old man Ben froze. The voice came from behind. He turned slowly, hands raised. From behind a tree stepped a younger man, early 30s, wearing camo fatigues and black gloves. He was smaller than Reed, wiry but intense, eyes sharp and hollow. Kyle Mercer, the younger brother of a known poacher out of Montana, trigger-happy, reckless, and always eager to impress. Ben forced a calm smile. "I'm a researcher, just studying moss growth. Didn't mean to intrude." Kyle sneered. "Moss? Huh, got a camera and everything." He reached out to snatch the camera from Ben's neck. But Ben, despite his age, reacted fast. He dropped to the ground, rolling behind the log. Kyle shouted, fumbling for a sidearm. But Ben was already on his feet and running, his boots digging into soft earth, breath ragged but steady. Back at the clearing, Emily fashioned a rough sling using the strap from her backpack and a section of rain tarp. Ghost was too weak to stand but had begun to twitch gently at her touch. She knew they needed shelter. And soon. The forest here was wild. But she remembered an old ranger station, abandoned years ago, just half a mile west. She braced herself, then carefully rolled Ghost onto the tarp. His weight was immense, but the slope of the ground helped her drag him slowly over the roots and moss. She didn't see the movement in the woods behind her. She didn't know she was being watched. Not by Bigfoot. Not this time. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was waiting, heavy, charged. The kind of silence that sat before a storm or the snap of a snare, somewhere deep within Cedar Ridge. It had begun, the hunt. Emily crouched behind a thick patch of fern, her hands resting on Ghost's side. The white tiger, though breathing, was still weak, and his eyes fluttered open only in brief, confused moments. His wounds had stopped bleeding, but the strain of survival lingered like smoke in his chest. Beside her, Ben Holloway scanned the woods. jaw clenched. His earlier calm had been replaced by something colder, focused dread. "They're in," he whispered. "I saw them from the ridge. 4 men, with gear, dogs, no hesitation. They're professionals." She didn't need to ask who they were, the poachers, those who saw Ghost not as a creature, but a price tag. A bark pierced the air, sharp, precise, then another. Ben's hand tightened on the walking stick he'd fashioned from a fallen branch. "They're tracking by scent." Emily looked down at Ghost. "We have to move him." Ben nodded. "There's a cave. Northwest slope, shallow, but defensible. You remember she did. From old ranger maps, let's go." As they began dragging the tarp again, with Ghost barely stirring. A second bark echoed, closer this time, followed by human voices, muffled but purposeful. The poachers were spreading out. The hunt had truly begun, beyond the mist, across a broken line of trees. The hunters came. 4 men moved through the underbrush, armed with tranquilizer rifles and wearing hardened canvas vests. Their boots were military issue, the 2-lid dogs. Belgian Malinois with harnesses and muzzle radios snapped at the scent trails, the leader of the group. A heavy-set man with a bristled gray beard and a neck like a stump was named Cal Rooker, a former game warden turned poacher for hire. He knew every corner of this forest, though he'd long ago stopped seeing it as sacred. "Stay tight," Rooker barked. "Target's close. We bring it out alive. Big bonus if the second anomaly's caught." 2, the what one man asked. Rooker didn't explain. The others had heard rumors of a creature upright and massive. Something impossible. Glimpsed briefly by trail cams and half-mad hikers. The thing they were told not to shoot. Too valuable, too dangerous. Emily and Ben struggled up a shallow incline, every breath a race against the sounds behind them. Ghost stirred, letting out a low groan. His paws twitched, his body beginning to respond to instinct. Emily whispered, "Just a little more." "Boy, we're almost there." Then, a low, guttural sound stopped her. Not from Ghost, not from Ben, from the woods ahead. A shadow moved between trunks, tall, broad, silent, Bigfoot. He stepped into view just long enough for Emily to catch his eyes. And then he was gone again, disappearing into the mist. Ben touched her shoulder. "He knows." Down in the brush. The dogs stopped. Rooker looked around, hold. The canines were trembling. Not with fear, but confusion. They had lost the scent. One barked toward the left, the other to the right. Then came the roar. It rolled through the trees like thunder. Unnatural and full-bodied. Trees shook, birds scattered. Northwest quadrant, one man shouted. But when they turned toward the sound, all they saw was a shape, massive and fast, rushing through the trees. Branches snapped under its weight. The sound wasn't running from them. It was pulling them. "Go," Rooker yelled. Now, the men and dogs sprinted after the moving figure. They didn't question it. Hunters hunted. That was what they did. Emily and Ben reached the cave moments later. It was barely a crawl space from the outside, hidden behind a curtain of hanging roots and ivy, but inside it opened up into a natural hollow in the stone. The air was cool, dry, still. Ghost slid off the tarp with a soft grunt. Emily cradled his head. "You're safe now," she whispered. Ben moved to the entrance, pulling branches into place. He led them off. Emily nodded. "He gave us this chance." The pursuit was chaos. The poachers followed the crashing sound through gullies and bramble until the terrain turned against them. The woods became twisted, roots like traps, and visibility dropped to yards. Rooker's breathing grew heavy. The dogs whined, and then silence, not peaceful, predatory. The first growl came from the right, then from the left, low, unified. Rooker froze. What? From the trees. A pack of gray wolves stepped forward. 7 of them, fur thick and wet with dew, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They made no sound, no lunge, but they circled. The dogs snarled, confused. Then the leader, a tall, lean female with a white streak down her muzzle, howled. The forest responded. More shapes moved in the mist. The pack was larger than it first appeared. The poachers backed up. One man raised his weapon. A warning growl stopped him. The pack didn't attack. They stood, blocking the path. The men turned and fled, back at the cave. Emily leaned against the wall, arms around Ghost, listening as the echoes of the forest shifted. Ben exhaled slowly. "They're gone," Emily whispered. "They never stood a chance. Not against him. Not against this place." She looked out into the woods, and though she couldn't see him, she felt it. Bigfoot was still there, somewhere in the dark, watching, guarding. The last of the autumn leaves had begun to fall, drifting like golden feathers onto the forest floor of Cedar Ridge. A month had passed since the chaos, since the gunfire and howls, since the forest itself had risen to protect one of its own. In that time, healing had taken root, quiet but firm, like the moss between the stones. At the edge of the tree line, nestled beside a small stream and under the long shadows of fir and pine, stood a new structure, simple, hand-built, shaped not for human pride but for wild necessity. It bore a wooden sign hand-carved by weathered fingers. Ghostlight Sanctuary, inside. The air smelled of pine wood and dried herbs. There were wide pens and shaded runs, open enclosures and hidden hollows for animals who feared the sky. Every wall was lined with warmth, not heat, but intention. This was not a place of cages. It was a place of recovery, of release. Emily Carson. Now, with sun-darkened skin and quiet lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, moved through the sanctuary like part of the landscape. She wore denim overalls over an old flannel shirt, her hair still unkempt and tied back in a loose braid. Her voice was low when she spoke to the animals, and softer still when she didn't. People from the nearby town of Silver Glen occasionally came to help, or just to watch, but they never stayed long. The silence of the place had a way of humbling even the most talkative visitors. Beside her, Ben Holloway, grayer and a bit slower now, kept the records. He logged every injured fawn, every bird with a bent wing, every fox with limping gait. His hands, once used for chalkboards in lecture halls, had found new purpose among splints and shelter walls. Ben had stopped calling it work. Now he simply called it repayment. And somewhere near the sanctuary grounds, just beyond the clearing but never far, Ghost roamed. The white tiger had recovered fully. The scars along his flank had faded into faint lines beneath fur, and his gait had regained strength. His eyes still gleamed that strange blue, but now they were steady, no longer filled with pain. He came and went as he pleased, sleeping beneath the cedar canopy or resting on the flat rock near the stream. Emily never tried to keep him fenced. He wasn't meant for fences. And though Ghost had never made a sound, he had become the unspoken symbol of the place. His presence reassured the frightened and calmed the restless. Sometimes, he would stand by a recovering animal's pen for hours, silent and still, just existing beside them. At night, Emily would leave food at the edge of the woods, a quiet habit now, something unspoken between her and the forest. Small bundles wrapped in cloth, berries, dried fish, a jar of honey once. It was never disturbed like normal scavenging. The food was taken carefully, deliberately, and sometimes in the morning. She would find them, footprints, massive, humanoid, impossibly long strides pressed into the mud with startling clarity, always facing the sanctuary, never away. No one had seen Bigfoot again, but he was still there. Ben had found hair once, dark, coarse, tangled on a broken branch too high for even a bear to reach. A neighbor's trail cam caught only shadows and the strange reflection of eyes. But none of that mattered. Emily didn't need more proof. His silence was enough. One day, as the first frost painted the grass silver, a visitor arrived. Her name was Sierra James, a conservation officer from the Department of Wildlife, in her early 30s with sun-chapped lips, tightly braided black hair, and the demeanor of someone used to being underestimated. She had come to investigate rumors of poachers routed by wolves, of sightings in the woods, of a sanctuary built too quickly and quietly for proper registration. But when she met Emily, when she saw a ghost step out from the tree line and nuzzle Emily's hip like a barn cat, Sierra didn't reach for her clipboard. She reached for her heart. "He's the one they were after, wasn't he?" she asked, watching the tiger settle under a nearby tree. Emily nodded. He was, but they never got close. Sierra studied her, then the sanctuary. Her voice softened. "This place, it shouldn't exist, not like this, but it does, and it works." She paused. "I'll file the paperwork. Make it official." Emily looked at her, eyes stinging. "Thank you." That night, as the wind stirred dry leaves across the clearing, Emily stood alone at the edge of the woods. The moon was full. Ghost was somewhere in the trees, invisible but near, and there, in the soft mud by the food bundle she had left, were new tracks, still fresh, facing her. She knelt beside them, laid her hand gently inside the print. It dwarfed her fingers, but not her courage. "Thank you," she whispered. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a branch creaked, then silence, but Emily knew he was listening. Ghost returned at dawn, stretching beneath the old cedar and watching the sun rise through the trees. His ears flicked toward the forest, and for a long while, he didn't move. Only when the sun fully broke the horizon did he blink slowly and rise. Then, like the wind that passed without sound, he looked back, once, toward the forest's heart, toward him, and walked on. Sometimes, the greatest miracles are the ones no one sees. Not the loud ones, not the dramatic ones, but the quiet interventions, the silent protectors, the unexpected kindness that changes everything. In a world full of noise and fear, it's easy to forget that God still works through the wild, through the forgotten, through those we least expect. Even a legend walking quietly in the forest, or a tiger given a second chance. This story is more than about survival. It's about faith that there is something greater watching over us, guiding our steps, standing between us and the dangers we may never know. Like Bigfoot in the trees, or Ghost finding peace after pain. God's presence may be unseen, but never absent. So if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe again. Leave a comment with your thoughts, or just type Amen if you felt something deep stir in your soul, and if you believe in the power of compassion, healing, and God's quiet miracles. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. May God bless you, protect your family, and walk with you, even in the shadows of the forest.